This research was made with the intent to analyze and discover the setting, characteristics, effects, future risks, and recommendations to mitigate future floods after the Cumberland River flooding that occurred in Nashville, Tennessee in May of 2010. As seen in the picture, the Cumberland River stretches 688 miles. It is also a blessing and a curse for those surrounding it. The river itself has a history of flooding and causing damage to those who have not been prepared. The Cumberland River has a plateau reaching over 1,000 feet of rough terrain, making it a barrier for humans to interact with its nature. However, many areas are hotspots for businesses who are housing for tourists and who give riverboat tours. Although many view the river as an object of beauty, the large populations living in the hazard zone are very vulnerable and susceptible to large-scale flooding. The Tennessee Valley region was an area damaged by flooding caused by record-breaking rains of 18 to 20 inches between the dates of May 1st through May 4th. This region of Tennessee was exposed to a devastating flash flood that occurred along the Cumberland River and its tributaries. Throughout the 4-day time span, 11 forecast river stations recorded record-breaking levels of water rushing by their locations. The cause of this flood is directly applicable to the high amount of rain that occurred in a 4-day time span, which ultimately produced flash flooding and also exceeded the 100-year hazard forecast for rainfall in this region. Runoff on May 1st produced sharp rises in the Cumberland River and surrounding streams, followed by May 2nd thunderstorms that entered streams which had already crested and added an additional volley of thunderstorms late in the afternoon that fell on fully saturated soil that ultimately provided the ideal landscape for a strong flash flood to rapidly occur and damage the surrounding environment. Effects of the flooding along the Cumberland River Valley were devastating. There were considerable fatalities as well as considerable damage. The number of deaths totaled in at 26, with 11 being from the greater Nashville area. Damages were estimated around $2 billion, with over 11,000 structures damaged along the many major roadways in the Nashville area. Interstate 24 was at one point covered in 6 feet of water, stranding and disabling the vehicles that were left on it. Flooding on this scale has also had an immense impact on the surrounding natural environment. Erosion of riverbanks is increased, habitats for local wildlife was destroyed, nutrients are washed out of the soil through erosion, saturation, and evaporation. As seen in the last few pictures, this damage in turn affects the human population living in the surrounding area, as well as disrupting the natural cycle of the environment. When assessing the risk of flooding, the 2010 Cumberland flood was a 1,000-year epic event which had a 0.1% likelihood of occurring, according to the National Weather Service. A flood the magnitude of this one in 2010 is not likely to occur anytime soon in Nashville's future. Flooding is still a problem in the area today, but the 2010 flash floods were a rarity. For more floods to occur, all that simply has to happen is above average rainfall, and the water levels will once again start to rise. The state of Tennessee will have to take action if they don't want a flood like this one in 2010 to happen again, which is why we will now talk about ways to reduce the future impact of the floods. Hazard mitigation is defined as any sustained action taken to reduce or eliminate long-term risks to life and property from hazards. There are two types of flood mitigation: control over the rivers and control over the land. In order to achieve control over the flow and height of the water carried by the river, the channel, floodplain, or watershed must undergo some physical alterations. This includes the construction of dams, retention basins, or reservoirs on main streams or tributaries to store excessive water and release it gradually after the threat of a flood has passed. This also includes levees or flood walls that can be constructed to confine floodwaters to a floodway, thereby reducing flood damage. The second way is to control the land by designated floodways and encroachment lines. These are the lateral boundaries of the floodway where no construction or landfilling should be permitted. This is done to ensure that the flow of the water is not obstructed. Also by zoning, which is a legal tool used by governments to control the development in areas which are or are likely to become prone to flooding. If the state of Tennessee can take some of the measures, the next big flood will not be as hazardous as the famous 2010 Cumberland flood. The May 2010 Tennessee floods were a 1,000-year major flood event as a result of torrential rains in early May. Despite this event, future risk assessments of another large flood are low, and procedures are now put in place to reduce future impacts. This will allow this great river to continue thriving as a prominent state feature.